Warren Etheridge, host of The High Bar. I've known Richard Shepard for a number of years now, and I really do believe he's a tremendously underrated filmmaker. I love The Matador. I love The Hunting Party. And if you haven't seen Dom Hemingway, the first 5 minutes of that film are ones that are burned into my head and will be in yours too. Jude Law is absolutely breathtaking. That might be a word for it. You just have to check it out. Richard Shepard does a lot of work as a writer-director, and recently he's been doing a lot of work with his partner Jenny Connor, who is the co-creator of the series Girls on HBO. He's directed a number of the episodes, and he is really one of the most knowledgeable film people in my circle of friends. And I was delighted that with Tina Noble, producer of The High Bar, we went down and snuck into the Polo Lounge at the Beverly Hills Hotel and grabbed Richard Shepard for a conversation in which we raised the bar for character actors. And I love character actors. They're my favorite thing. In fact, I don't care about stars at all. When I see a character actor, that's when I get excited. I approached a character actor, Frank Wood, at the Salt Lake City airport because I was so excited, and he thought I was a lunatic for knowing who he was. But that's the way it works for me. I love character actors, and Richard Shepard knows them so well, and he'll raise the bar for all of them.
I've been busy and traveling, and I've just wrote a new movie.
Yay!
So hopefully you can get that guy.
Which is? Can you say anything about that?
No.
Do you have somebody in mind who could be the lead?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, I have a few people in mind who I would like to. I just finished it like 2 weeks ago. So.
Oh wow.
Getting a producer, and then we'll figure out how to do it. But. I'm excited. Yeah. Because I only direct features that I write. Right. It's
It makes it easier.
Well, I have a real advantage in that writer-directors have an advantage because you've got two of the three things you need to get the money,
right?
Which is script and a director.
Right.
Then we just need an actor.
Right.
So it's actually like I'm 2/3 of the way, and I'm always 2/3 of the way there, which is helpful, right. And has always been the way I've gone in my movies finance is getting an actor and then sort of cobbling together like the Syrian Film Fund and the drug cartel money laundering film association and all those other ways of getting movies financed.
So many illicit sources of income and revenue. You could be a president.
I will tell you that there is no doubt that certain of my movies were financed, and thank you very much, in ways that if someone were really to investigate would be dubious. I mean, it's just the like independent film is just, there's always some sort of strange undercurrent of like whether it's the development funds or whatever. Right. I mean, early in my career, there was a Hasidic man who came with a bag with $300,000 in cash that he was literally laundering through the movie. So nothing really shocks me.
But it's nice that you have the support of the criminal underworld.
It's helpful getting a table.
But the idea of casting, and we'll work into this, is that it's interesting for your films, you're writing and directing, but you have a very particular sensibility, which I assume means that you have to look for something very particular in your actors. What is that? Can you spot it immediately?
Well, I've had a lot of luck casting actors slightly against type, right. Which I think is part of what independent film does, because there has to be a reason that these actors are going to do a movie for basically no money. You know what I mean? And so if you offer an actor a role that they've played 20 times and they actually get paid their full freight for it, they're just not going to do it. Right. But if you can figure out a way to create a character that would be really interesting and then find an actor who hasn't quite had a chance to play a role like that, you have an opportunity if you're smart. So, I always look at actors and see, are they still involved? Are they still actually caring? Right. You know what I mean? Because there's certain actors who are kind of just get lazy, and you can see it happen, and they kind of lose that energy. But then in the case of my last movie with Jude Law and Dom Hemingway, I saw Contagion, and I was like, man, Jude Law is like great in this. Where the hell's that guy been? And like, he's edgy and interesting, and like suddenly it was like, well, that makes that would make sense, and he's never played a role like in my movie. Same thing with Pierce Brosnan in The Matador. It was like, well, yeah, he's played killers before, but he's never played one that was able to show weakness and whatever. And in terms of the comedy element of it, I feel like if actors have like a sense of timing, which good actors do, you can kind of, especially in my movies, which are very, very much stick to the script and have no improvisation in them really, like you can get it, you can they can get to the rhythm by the nature of the writing.
What you're saying about casting against type is interesting, because it's almost as if you take those stars, Jude Law and Pierce Brosnan, and turn them into character actors to a certain extent.
Well, because I'm reaching them at a point in their careers where they kind of have to make that pivot. If you're 25 years old and good looking, you're getting leading man roles. But if you're on the other side of 40 or closer to 50, you may still occasionally get that romantic lead or whatever. But in general, the hair is starting to recede and all of that other stuff. And there's the newer, better looking version of yourself. And so these actors, the good ones, realize that they kind of have to segue a little bit into more character acting things, and also gives them some meat. If you're not carrying the lead as a romantic lead in a movie and you're playing a different sort of character, suddenly the world is your oyster. And you can imagine that a lot of people like Jude has played, how many romantic comedies was he offered in, the 90s, that he must be so thrilled to be getting The Young Pope or to be getting my movie or to get anything in which he actually can sink his teeth into it.
Because he's a really good actor. Underneath that all, he's a really good actor.
But you have to see through that. There are some people who are very good leading actors, leading movie stars who aren't necessarily great actors, and then you can see certain actors almost not so great at the beginning of their career, but sort of morphing into the better version of themselves. Like Billy Crudup, who was never that interesting to me when he was younger, is doing like extraordinary work right now, certainly in 20th Century Women and in Spotlight, and he's like become a character actor. He no longer has the burden of being like a romantic lead, and now he's actually showing the world that he's capable of other interesting things. And so as a film goer, it's sort of fun to spot these actors and go, oh, they're actually doing more interesting stuff now. And so like this new script that I've written that has a female lead, I'm kind of going through the list of actors who I know, of course, they could do it, and then the other ones who are like, well, this would be a surprise. This could be something we haven't seen this person do. And that's sort of a fun little stew, because you want to give audiences something they haven't seen before. And since you're dealing with a limited budget, it's not going to be in spectacle. It's going to be in the material and then the performances.
Well, it's interesting, this idea, of people, Billy, who did have a lot of theater training going in, but has definitely aged into being a better actor. But there have been a number of people, not even trying to qualify or rank them, but make that turn, which I always find fascinating. Like Kevin Bacon did a little bit, and Woody Harrelson did a bit, where some thing seems to turn on and oh, I'm an actor, rather than a pretty boy.
Right, and also they get hired young. If you're a good-looking guy or girl, you start working really young, and you don't necessarily have a huge body of work behind you. So if you go to the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours sort of theory, it may take them 10 or 15 years to sort of actually become the actor that they're capable of becoming. And I think sometimes you see actors who can't make that swing, who don't quite have it, and they end up on sort of a mid-level TV show or something, and that's sort of, and they're fun and they're richer than we are and all of that, but they're not really challenging themselves, and they're not capable of sort of stepping up to that thing. But character actors in general, the movies that I love from the 70s, it's almost the supporting actors that leap out at you, and then the leading roles in a lot of those movies were character parts. If you look at all The President's Men, which of course everyone's talking about now in this world of Trump and journalism, and you watch that movie, it's the best performance Robert Redford ever gave, and because he's not playing a romantic lead. Right. It's he doesn't have that burden of having to be something mythical or the perfect guy or whatever. He's a flawed guy, and there's a 6-minute take where he's on the phone and you don't have the other, it's a oneer, and he's talking to someone on the phone and talking to a few people on the phone, and he's mucking it up and all of this stuff, and it's great. That's character actor stuff. And then of course he's surrounded by great character actors, which we've always talked about this. If you get an actor and you surround them with great actors. They're just going to do better work purely out of fear of being blown off the screen. Yeah. I mean, I was... The best decision I made on the Matador was casting Greg Kinnear, because it literally... Greg is really funny, and Pierce sort of realized that like he couldn't walk through this movie or it was going to be kind of embarrassing for him, right. You know, and I think Pierce had walked through some movies in his recent past, and I think that is true with the people you put together. How do you put together a cast so that it elevates the lead person but also puts them on notice that, hey, guess what, these parts are fun enough for the supporting people to shine in a way that could eclipse you. So don't let it happen.
Do you have a memory? I know for me that I think the first character actor who I remember making a mark on me was Frank Nelson. Yes. I thought, wow, that's an amazing career. It's a different type of character actor, but do you remember who made the biggest impression on you early on?
Burgess Meredith in Rocky. I loved that movie deeply, and I was 11 years old or something, and Burgess Meredith, I saw it like 3 times in the theater, and I just loved that guy. And then he was in the Batman TV show, like blew my mind. Like, how could it be that the guy from Batman is in Rocky? You know, and then of course I was too young to know that he'd been acting for 40 years and whatever, but like, so, you know, I mean, but this is what happens when you're, you know, a movie nerd. When you see so many films, you start connecting the dots and like, oh my God, that person was in that movie.
But like some tremendous acting going on in the background. And you talked about short doc that you made about John Cazale. I mean, who owns a record that will never be broken, I would imagine.
5 movies in his entire career, all 5 nominated for Best Picture. I mean, and 3 of them winning. I mean, the seminal movies from the 70s, The Godfather, Godfather 2, Dog Day Afternoon, The Deer Hunter, and The Conversation. I mean, to bat 1,000 is incredible. Of course, his average is that because he died at 42. Right. Had he lived, he probably would have done The Bad News Bears and Breaking Training or something, and he would have ruined that streak immediately because he needed to buy like a second house or pay for his honeymoon. But that's a situation in which you can look at those movies, and all the actors from those movies who I talked to for my documentary were like, he made us better. I mean, that was like just the overriding thing they said. He made you better. Pacino said it. Meryl Streep said it. Actors like that. They don't want them to steal the movie from you, but they want to have someone who's actually going to sort of keep you on your toes, because it's very hard. Movies take months to make, and you're sometimes away from your family, you're sometimes away from your normal things. It's hard every day to wake up and like, what was the scene that came before this? You need to be surrounded by a director who keeps you on your toes, and then the other cast. And there's reasons why certain movies have like an incredible ensemble, and you're like, oh my God, every single person was great in that movie. Right. Like, and conversely, you can look like a movie this year that had brilliant performances, which was Moonlight, and they were in 3 separate short films almost. These actors never got to play with each other, only one or 2 at a time, and yet it feels like a cohesive whole because the director was able to get those performances in such a strong way that felt like they were all acting together even when they weren't.
Back on John Cazale, it may be crazy, but is it too much to argue that it's not just that he happened to be in those movies, but that his presence in those movies elevated them to that Best Picture level?
I mean, he certainly contributed to them being great movies, but it is a little bit of luck. I mean, you know, it is... I mean, John Cazale got cast in The Godfather because the producer or casting director went to see Richard Dreyfuss in a play and noticed him in it. Right. You know, so it's a lot, you know, and I'm sure at that point John Cazale was so happy just to have a job, right. You know, but he did great, and couples like, I should put him in other stuff. I mean, that's one of the work begets work, and if you happen to luck into working with great people, there's a reason that Pacino did 3 movies and 5 plays with him, and that Meryl Streep, you know, did a play and a movie with him, and the Coppola did 3 movies with him. It's like the people were like, oh, you're good. I mean, I always think about like who do I work with all the time? Which DP will I work with? Well, I loved my last experience. I'm going to take this person along. I'm going to take this person along. And it's great because you get to collaborate over and over. And there's certain actors you're like, oh, I really can't wait to work with that person again. Or I don't know if I ever will, but I would. And so good work immediately, like if you're lucky enough to be surrounded by the right people. I mean, Ed Wood had a similar thing, except he wasn't making great movies. You know what I mean? But he was working with the same people.
But his talent found its level.
It did. I mean, I happen to love those movies, but maybe not for the same reason as I love Godfather 2.
There's another good movie this year, Manchester by the Sea.
Yes.
In which I love Kenneth Lonergan's writing. He has a habit of appearing in his films. Is that a good choice?
Well, you're putting me on the spot. I'll tell you, it's interesting. He was... remind me the name of You Can Count on Me.
You Can Count on Me.
He's great in You Can Count on Me and plays, as a priest. And he's really quite funny and memorable. He's not so great in Manchester by the Sea, and I'm not quite sure why. And then, of course, there's like this extra added shot of him walking away, which I can't quite understand. Like, it's a weird thing. I mean, I'm not against director cameos. I mean, you're part of it's such a family when you're making a movie that in a way you kind of want to have forever of what you look like at that moment you're doing it. So I do kind of get that. I would do it if I didn't know as a fact that I'm the world's worst actor. And I am terrible. And I am too much of an egotist, A, as a human being, to want everyone to see how terrible I am, but B, also to protect my movie. Like, I don't want to even have one line where I'm like ordering French fries in a restaurant. I would just stink up the screen. I think Manchester by the Sea, if you're talking about performances, was certainly in my mind had the best performance of the year by Casey Affleck. A single performance, of incredible subtlety. And that was a situation in which, again, if we're talking about supporting actors, the cast around him was so very good. And because everyone was keeping it down and not getting into histrionics, it allowed Casey Affleck to give... It reminded me a little bit of Peter Sarsgaard in Shattered Glass, in which I thought was one of the great performances of subtlety. So that when he literally does get angry, which he doesn't have to raise his voice, it's just that subtle. And Casey Affleck was able to portray a truly troubled, sad human being in such a subtle, strong way. And whether Kenneth Lonergan should have put himself in the movie or not, he certainly knows how to direct actors in his material.
He's fantastic. It just struck me as an odd choice at that time. There is something about that subtlety, and going back to John Cazale, in your doc, you have Sam Rockwell talking about John, and I love Sam Rockwell.
Me too.
As well. But there's such an apparent love and appreciation from one actor to another. Who do you think are the descendants of John Cazale?
Well, in that documentary, I interviewed Sam Rockwell, Steve Buscemi, and Philip Seymour Hoffman, and at that time, that was coming on 8 years ago. It seemed that those guys were sort of the next generation, actors who sort of were fearless and willing to play losers without, as we talked about in the documentary, Cazale never had a wink at the audience to say, I'm not a loser, but watch me play this loser. Right. He just could play a loser who you ended up having deep sympathy for, even if he was a scumbag like Fredo, you cared about him. So who's the next generation of actors who are doing it? Well, you could look at Casey Affleck very specifically in Manchester by the Sea, who is really playing a character who, basically is the reason that his children died, and that he has to live with that.
Spoiler alert.
Well, if you haven't seen the movie already, I have no interest in you. It's been out for 2.5 months. It's nominated for Best Picture. It's a fucking great movie. But he's willing to play that part without having to show anybody that he's okay, that he's really actually strong. He was a mess, and you buy it. You buy completely. And another spoiler alert for Manchester by the Sea, when he goes to the police station and they're talking to him about the fire that killed his kids, and then he walks out and he grabs a gun and tries to kill himself. That is not a showboaty moment, and it could have easily been played that way. It felt actually like he wanted to do it, and because of his performance of sadness, you actually you completely buy it.
Who are some of the character actors that people should look out for that they're unfamiliar with? Some of those
who are working now?
Yeah, under the radar character actors.
I mean, I think that's a great question. I mean, I think people probably know Michael Shannon at this point.
Right.
But he's an actor who just sort of shows up in movies. Like, he clearly is a workaholic because he's was in 6 movies this year. But he's so good. He's so extraordinarily good. Whether he's a leading man or in Nocturnal Animals, he's fantastic in a supporting role. He's someone who every time I see him on screen, I'm like, oh, well, he's going to be amazing.
Right.
He's going to kill it.
Right.
And Greta Gerwig is someone who she sort of toggles between leading parts, certainly in movies that she writes and now is directing, but then in 20th Century Woman has a supporting role and is so strong in it. So, and I do think that that's a little bit of what's happening now in terms of sort of the landscape that we live. You're not sort of tied to just one thing. You're not just a leading man or a leading woman. There's a lot of different stuff going on, and so you see a lot of actors taking sort of supporting roles that you're like, oh, I'm surprised they're taking a supporting role, and you're like, well, that's a good role, and it's fitting between the big movie that's going to pay for their life for the next 2 years. I mean, it's an interesting time. I mean, if you think about anyone who's in a superhero movie, they know, okay, well, the next X-Men or the next Captain Marvel or whatever is starting in June, and it's September. Like, I gotta work, I gotta do something, and I'm rich, so I can do anything I want. And also in television, I mean, people have a leading role in television. Kathryn Hahn is a great example of a supporting actress who cannot do any wrong in my mind. The only thing wrong is that people write lousy roles and think that because they cast her, she's going to make it great, and she makes it certainly tolerable a lot of the time, but she needs someone to be writing. I mean, she can do anything. I worked with her on a Funny or Die short and also on Girls, and oh my God, I mean, she's just one of those actors who you're like, every single take is good, not only good, but different, but funny and real, and she's remarkable. So there's a lot of, I mean, if I gave it half a minute of thought, I could come up with 20 others, and certainly when I working on Girls has been a great place to get, for 6 seasons, so many different actors come in and out of that series, and they could basically get anyone they wanted. So there's a nice introduction to see actors do other like I did an episode that's going to come on this season with Matthew Reeves from The Americans playing a totally different role, and for an actor to say, okay, well, I'm going to do a TV show in which I'm being paid $8,000, so that's a lot of money to most people, but in our business, not a ton of money. He's like, I'm not doing it for the money, I'm doing it to show people that, A, because it's a fun role, B, I want to be part of Girls' history, and C, I want to show you a different side of me. And so with so many people on TV series, there's especially Netflix shows where they're doing 10 episodes, they can't do another TV series as a star, so they either have to do guest star roles or movies, and doing a big movie will take too long, so suddenly you can find these actors in smaller roles in movies because they have the time, but they don't have enough time to star in something, which is actually kind of exciting, really. You can almost imagine that any actor who's on a TV show, you can get in a movie if your timing is right.
If he were still alive and he had devoted himself to acting instead of being a rock god, could David Bowie have been a great character actor?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, David Bowie was a very good actor. And I thought you were actually going to ask John Cazale, because I think that if John Cazale had lived, he would have been in Tarantino's movies. I think he could have had a career like Christopher Walken, maybe better, because I think he was a different sort of I love Christopher Walken, make no mistake, but I think Cazale could could have had a Harvey Keitel career or better. Like, he would have been a household name, in the acting world, like a real household name. But sort of, and Bowie, without a doubt, in the movies that he did, he was always really good. And certain people are talented and fascinating, and you look at them and you want to know more, and certain people are boring. And you look at certain actors and you're like, you can keep shoving him in movie after movie, I'm not going to feel anything for him. And then you suddenly are like, why is this person getting my attention? And it doesn't always have to be in the most incredible role. You're like, who is that person? And I sometimes like it when I see an actor and I'm like, oh my God, I've been seeing him in movies for 10 years, I never even noticed him. But then you're like, of course. I
want to make sure we get back to Catherine Hahn, but since we got to Girls, and I wanted to get there, is that you were talking about how, now there's less distinction between a lead actor and supporting actor. You take the roles that are good. And it feels to me on some level that Girls, and particularly Lena Dunham, is somebody who helped subvert that system. Because in theory, she would have been the supporting role. She would have been the best friend or something, but made herself a star.
Well, if you have a creative voice and you're not making a movie or doing something and waiting for someone to give you an opportunity, you're behind the eight ball. You're just not being smart, because this is a time where if you have the will, there's a million. It's easy to make something. It's easy to get it seen. It's not easy to have talent, but it is easy to be doing something. And Lena basically was like, I'm making these little shorts and these little indie films, and I'm free. I'm going to star in it because I'm writing it for myself, and I'm also cheap. And then when Girls came around, part of what the genius of it was that it was like, we're going to show something that shouldn't be startling, but was actually startling to people. Like, here's someone who does not look like an anorexic person who's going to be sexual and naked and all of this other stuff. And there's comedy there, but there's also like reality there. And guess what? The world kept spinning, and so I think it opened the eyes to a lot of people that, like, there are a lot of different voices out there, and B, there's a lot of stories involving these voices that actually could become quite interesting. So yes, you're absolutely right. Like, if Lena was waiting as an actress for roles, she would be playing the best friend or the third lead or the girl who can't get the date or some whatever cliche that they would figure in, and that would be sort of where it would be. But because she sort of was like, no, I actually have stories I want to tell, she was able to introduce herself to the world. So it wasn't a mystery. I mean, HBO saw Tiny Furniture and like, she carried that movie. She's interesting. She's funny. And the show's going to be cheaper. The entire first season of the show is going to be cheaper than the pilot of Game of Thrones. So like that, it didn't cost a lot because she was able to do it for no money. So I like that do-it-yourself stuff. I mean, I talk to actors all the time, and I'm like, if you're writing or you're creating, that's extraordinarily helpful. Do not wait for the system. Like, you have to subvert the system at this point. Like, it's like, if it's not good, it's not good, and nothing, you can do 50 shorts, and if they're all bad, nothing's going to happen. But the fact is, you can shoot something on an iPhone that looks great. You can edit it on your computer, and it's fine. The sound is amazing. The ability to produce now is, I made a $52,000 little thriller at a very low point in my career, like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 22 years ago, and it was a $52,000 thriller that Sam Rockwell was in, and it was his second movie, and we put it together with we begged, borrowed, and stole, but it would cost now $5,000 because the $50,000 was for film, for camera, and for lights. The fact of the matter is, the way the cameras and systems are working now, literally, I just did a short in Tokyo and with Elizabeth Moss from Mad Men, and one of the reasons I did it was that I was actually wanting to prove to myself something that I've been feeling for a long time, that our film crews are so big that they're almost hurting the process. And I was like, what if I did a movie with a 9-person crew and treat it like a student film, except the crew would actually know what they're doing, as opposed to students who are learning, obviously. So I basically asked 9 people who I had worked with to help me out, and we shot with all available light. We had one handheld light, and the movie looks gorgeous. It looks like we could have spent millions of dollars on it. And from a directing standpoint, it was so intimate. It was a love story with Elizabeth Moss and Eben Moss Backrack, who's on Girls. And a lot of the time, they had radio mics on, and they were just walking through the streets of Tokyo, and I would just be like right off camera talking to them, and there was no one else around. So it was so intimate. It was a different way of working. And so if you think about being able to do something that looks truly professional like that, and then you go to someone who's just starting out, who may not have the talent to make something look super professional yet, but they certainly have the equipment to be able to tell the story. I mean, and if they have an artistic eye like Lena and an artistic voice like Lena, they can make something that breaks out. There's no way Lena would have gotten an HBO show based on a script.
Well, I mean, you said it at the beginning for yourself that if you're the writer and director, you're 2/3 of the way there. And essentially, on some level, if you're an actor and a writer, you're all the way there, because you can make your own stuff at that point. You could direct yourself if you needed to.
100%. I mean, and I mean, listen, the actors have that power. I mean, they've instantaneously greenlit their movie if they're a movie star, and if they're not a movie star, they've instantaneously got a cast. Right. And if you're being clever about it, but also, like, what is an actor? An actor is, sometimes the best actors aren't necessarily trained actors. Sometimes they're just a personality that like becomes a actor. I mean, I think that, like, if in the first season of Girls someone went to Lena and said, we want you to play a district attorney in Law and Order, she might not have been able to swing it. Now she probably could, very interestingly, but she wasn't yet an actor. She was just her channeling a character, and then as she sort of started doing it, she became an incredibly skilled actor, by doing the work. So, again, young people who want to break into the movies in any capacity, writing, directing, acting, the world we live in now almost requires you to do, and if you're not doing, what's your excuse?
Wow. Okay, but I'm not going to top that. What's your excuse? What's your excuse?
Seriously. God damn it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for listening to The High Bar. For more information, visit our website, thehighbar.tv. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, where you can find us at The High Bar. And on Instagram, we're at thehighbar.tv. The High Bar comes out every Thursday. You can subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what we're doing, we'd love it if you'd take some time to review us on iTunes. It really would go a long way. Thank you. For more information on this week's guest or topic, just go to thehighbar.tv. The High Bar is executive produced by Eliza Sheldon. The show is produced by Tina Knoll and Large Media. Our editor is Warren Langford. Our production assistant is Sarah Leibovitz. And I am your host, Warren Etheridge. Think responsibly.